At the conclusion of the session, please complete the short evaluation that is found in your welcome packet and turn it in at the registration desk upon your departure. For those seeking CPEs, a representative will be signing forms at the designated CPE tables, which are right there in the concourse, and then I can also sign them at the end. Sharing their thoughts and insights with us today are our guests, Valencia Newsom and Keith Jarbo.
Good. Can you hear me clearly? Okay. Good afternoon. I am going to briefly talk about G-invoicing, and then I will be turning it over to Fiscal Service to give you a little more in-depth knowledge about G-invoicing. So as you guys probably are aware, the federal government continues to be unable to adequately account for and reconcile intergovernmental activity balances. The federal government has a material weakness and a significant contributor to the lack of opinion on the financial report of the U.S. government. With that being said, DHS within itself also has challenges with reconciling buy-sell activity with ourselves as well as other federal trading partners. Treasury has mandated all federal agencies to implement G-invoicing by June 2021. That information could be found in TFM Bulletin 2018-10. That entitles all of the requirements for G-invoicing's mandate. What is G-invoicing? G-invoicing is an application which supports the processing of intergovernmental buy-sell transactions by federal trading partners. G-invoicing will address current buy-sell accounting and reporting challenges. G-invoicing will also interface to create IPAC transactions. G-invoicing does not replace your current procurement system or process. Some of the significant challenges that DHS faces with intergovernmental activity are agreements are unable to research and reconcile buy-sell transactions, inconsistent accounting or methodologies with capitalized assets, as well as assisted acquisitions, as well as we are unable to get complete information from GTAS. Some of the benefits from implementing G-invoicing is that processes will start to be consistent across DHS as well as federal program agencies. Key changes to your manual processes, agency location codes will be more accurate. Again, it will not replace your current financial system, so you still will be responsible for recording and doing all of your transactions in your financial system. G-invoicing is just to broker the information between federal program agencies. So far, components have been responsible for submitting G-invoicing account enrollment forms that were due in March. Agency implementation plans and attachment A templates have been received from most DHS components, as well as we have identified your budget funding strategy should have been included in your RAP submissions for the 21 submission that has already been submitted. And components are responsible for integrating G-invoicing by June 2021. Financial management will be responsible for reviewing the implementation plans, following up with the components to make sure all of the questions are addressed, as well as providing deadlines for DHS components to adhere to. So right now we're in the process of reviewing the implementation plans and the attachment A's, and then we will continue to have our working group meetings to let you guys know the established deadlines as we move forward to implement by June 2021. Some of the things that components have been doing is participating in ITWG meetings that are held by Fiscal Service, the DHS-wide G-invoicing meeting. They have been meeting with our agency implementation team lead as some of the things that we have been doing and encourage components to continue to do as you guys get up to speed with G-invoicing. Again, here are some of the deadlines that we have set so far. Some of them have already passed. But the major one right now is that we're working on is submitting to the fiscal service the implementation plan for the DHS-wide overall G-invoicing implementation, and then we are on track to meet the mandate by June 30, 2021. So I will turn it over to Keith, and he will go more into depth about G-invoicing and what interfaces they have already implemented and what will be forthcoming with G-invoicing.
Okay, thanks, Valencia. Everybody hear me? Is the mic working okay? All right, so you covered about everything, right? You went through most of my background, so I don't have to hit on the summary. Everybody's heard of us, right? Aside from what Valencia just told you, raise your hand if you had never heard of G-invoicing before you walked through the door today. All right, well, we got 2. That means that
3.
Darn, 3? Okay, I didn't do my job. Don't tell my boss. So that's good to hear. I'm glad that everybody's at least aware of the program and understands what we're after. I'll try and peel this back a little bit just so you can understand a little better the number side of this, the data side of it. Talk a little bit about the in-depth pieces of the program, where we're at as far as development and timelines on things like the application itself and the data standards and all the things that are going on in that arena. And then I think we'll probably close out the session probably with, I'm sure, some questions. Valencia really did go across really the landscape overall of sort of where we're at. I can say without question, you guys are definitely ahead of the curve in terms of implementation plans, at least from what I've seen so far. You've established some really good internal dates, really been driving to get that information in. That's very vital to us to have that by June. We had set that date a while back in the TFM, and most organizations have sort of pulled up and tried to go a month or so earlier, and you guys are definitely in front of them as well. So very good to see. Glad you're doing that. And glad you're thinking about it from the budgeting side as well, and the funding and all the changes that go into that. Those are all important things to be considering. All right, so what are we about? This slide's been out for a while. If you've heard me, do this type of session before, I apologize if it's rehashed, but it's always good to sort of hit the mark on what we're after. So it is a repository of information to improve the overall landscape of IGT buy sell. Valencia hit on that pretty well. We're looking for that transparent exchange of information between trading partners, understanding, of course, that there's missions. We all have our respective missions. This organization is probably maybe aside from DoD, one that really lives true to that, right? You guys were put together and you all have your various missions and charges that you have to do. But at the end of the day, there's some activity that we do as a government, and that's Treasury's world, right? To look at us from the top down as a government and do our financial reporting. And there's things that happen, these buy-sell transactions that go between organizations. Money's not leaving the government, that money should net out. So at the bottom of this slide here, you see some statistics. So last year in 2018, we had $780 billion worth of activity that was processed. This is pulled from GTAS data that was processed as an IGT buy-sell transaction. And of that activity, there was $21 billion worth of adjustments that Treasury had to do to bring that into alignment. Now that should have offset to the penny, right? The money never left the government. But because of the way we do our accounting, just because, and not through anyone's fault, it's just the fact of where we've evolved to over the years, those things don't always line up. And we're driving that number down. It's dropped in 2017, it was 27 billion, it's down to 21 billion. I haven't seen where it's gonna, kind of where we're trending towards this year, but it's looking good so far. So that's a big number, well above our materiality threshold. It keeps us from getting an opinion on the FR of the United States. And that's important to everybody, right? We as a government should be getting some form of an opinion on our financial statements. We all pay taxes. I always use the analogy of a stock. You wouldn't buy stock in a company that doesn't get a good opinion, right? So people have to pay taxes. They got to basically buy stock in the U.S., and we can't get an opinion. So a lot of activity to do here, a lot of activity to transition. We understand that. We've got 92 agencies, 715 or so ALCs that have to be converted. So it's a lot to do. We recognize that challenge. Let's talk about where the program is just on status-wise. So we do have capability up to broker the initial step, the general terms and conditions, and the orders, actually. We just did a release for orders here a couple months ago. So we've got the capability through the first 2 life cycle steps within the application now. And then we're going to be quickly coming up in August with the ability to exchange performance. I'll explain all these things in a little bit here if you haven't heard those terms from us. But think of everything that we're doing as sort of the life cycle activities that sit above the IPAC world that everybody knows and loves today. Everybody loves to move the money or get their money or reconcile their fund balance with Treasury. This program is sort of flipping the view on that and really looking upstream at all the activities that happened before that to make sure that that settlement transaction is actually happening in the right way and that we're doing the good accounting for it. So the program is very active in terms of where we're at in the development cycle. As I said, we got another release coming up in August for performance. We're doing a lot of work in the vendor space to get interfaces and capabilities there as far as our data standard. So regarding the data standard, there's a lot. If you plugged in, how many dial into the Intergovernmental Transaction Working Group, the ITWG? See a few hands. That's good. So you know for a fact that we plow through a lot of material in those calls. It's really back the truck up and dump it on you for consumption and try and get some things back from you on surveys. That's a lot of work that's going on in that data standard. That data standard has taken us a while to craft to make it something that works at the highest level, but still gets us deep enough to be able to get good data between organizations. So pushed another actual update out to the data standard earlier this week that includes the settlement specifications. It's actually augmented onto the backside of the performance spec. So if you've been following along on that, that's sort of the last piece of the puzzle that we had to put out there, just a few data attributes related to the settlement information that'll be coming back to us in G-invoicing from IPAC, and I'll hopefully get to that in enough detail here to make that make sense if it doesn't. So you see at the bottom there sort of where we are in our specs. We're sort of wrapped up there now and good from that perspective. Now those are not set in stone, right? And we're in a day and age in the world that this is a piece that challenges us on the program all the time, and that people always say, well, your requirements aren't done. We live in a world where requirements are never done. How many people pick up your phone or put your phone down at night and all of your updates to your apps are done, and you wake up in the morning and that little red dot's there again, right? And it's got a number in it that you need to update something. Things are always evolving. Data standards, applications, things are always in a state of flux. We're always learning new things and figuring out ways to make things better. So we don't do things on stone tablets anymore. So I want to just put that caveat out there that we do our best to make things transparent and do enough lead time on changes, and we do our best to have those conversations with both stakeholders in the agency communities as well as the vendor community. But we will continue to evolve and make this a better product. So by no means do we ever just sit still and rest. All right, so let's take a look at the overall architecture. We got a few of these. I could spend a lot of time mowing through them, and I'll try not to make sure we get time for questions today. This is really the high-level view of sort of the ins and outs of G-invoicing, and I want to touch just on a couple things here. So I think everybody gets the basic concept of we started an agreement. Off that agreement, there's some orders that are going to happen. You perform against those orders. You exchange that data back and forth with your trading partner. You can accomplish that either through the user interface that we've built in the system, or you can do system API calls through whatever vendor offering or ERP product that you're on. All those things go back and forth. Those are common places that you check in with your trading partner and get concurrence. You're shaking hands along the way. And most importantly, you're looking at the accounting policy that we've come along with as part of this program and making sure that you're doing the proper accounting at the time that these activities are happening. So there's a program guide that was pushed out a few months ago onto our G-invoicing website. I encourage you to take a look at that. It basically takes the life cycle steps here and correlates across to the accounting activity that should be happening in your system. G-invoicing is not going to do that accounting. It's providing the supporting documentation in a consistent place that's brokered and shared between both trading partners so that both sides have access to that data and should be booking it the same way at the same time to eliminate that adjustment piece that we need to do at year end. There's also a systems integration guide that'll be coming as well to accompany that, as well as some playbook information that'll be coming out. So there's a lot of things that we're working on the program to get that out there to kind of help with your transition and your onboarding. So just stay tuned on those. Definitely stay plugged into the ITWG and you'll hear more about those. But at the end of the day, all this activity goes back and forth. Hopefully you're picking up and you're doing your accounting right. And then what happens? You got to do that GTAS submission to us. Now, we're not touching GTAS. We're not even in edit for GTAS yet. We may be at some point in the distant future. That's a possibility. I know our internal leadership is looking at that. But for now, we're not running any edits from GTAS against data in G-invoicing. But if you're doing better accounting along the way, what we should see in GTAS is better data coming in on your trial balances and eliminating better. And that's the goal for us. That's the sort of the carrot on the stick for us. For you all and for all of your trading partners, what G-invoicing sort of provides is that transparent picture to make sure that if you've got a question about something, you've got a common source that you and your trading partner have agreed to go back and look at. Common thing we hear about IPACs, I don't know what it is, so I charged it back. So you should never have that anymore, right? You should be waiting on the IPACs to come, knowing that they're coming, not reacting to them. It's all about being proactive and not reactive. It's not pay and chase anymore. It's do the work and then get paid. That's the way that we need to shift this world to, okay? So a lot to do there. I realize it's easy to sit here in 20 seconds and say that. It takes, we got to this place in probably 20 or more years, right? OPAC was here when I started in the government. Now it's IPAC, and now here we are trying to sort of redo some of this stuff again. So it's been around. We kind of got ourselves in this corner, and we're going to get ourselves out together. So let me just jump through the flows real quick, just in case you want to see them, and we can kind of hit the high points here. Agreements are pretty easy. This is the 7600A that we built this on. Definitely an advocate from the Treasury perspective of let's go to data, let's go to systems, let's maybe try and get away from paper and forms. We do have a form out there. I'd love to see the world maybe just transition to using data. We do not have an inbound data interface, so I'll take that as a slap back, basically, that hey, I can't ditch your form because you haven't given me an inbound interface. That's a potential for the future. We do have it captured as a CR. For now, we do kind of have a reason why we did it this way. We want you to actually come in and have that conversation and do some exchange of information with your trading partners just to get to know them, right? If you're charging back because you don't know your trading partner, well, let's kind of take you through a doorway here and make sure that you at least know who you're dealing with. And these can be really broad. They don't have to be down at the very low transaction level. So we've configured it through the data standard to be rather high. Could be very, very long-term in nature if needed, or they can be very specific. That's all I'm going to say about agreements. There's a lot of stuff out on the website about it. The system's there. We've got training capabilities. So I encourage you, if you haven't gotten to this point, at least at looking at this piece of the world within your organization, go ahead and do that. And definitely take advantage of the multiple pieces of information that we have through either online training and or in-person training to get through some of these. We do some webinars on them as well. All right, so after an agreement, that handshake, depending upon how you scope that out, you're going to obviously then you're going to do some ordering, right? And I'm going to guess that in this organization we've got a pretty good mix of buying and selling going on, either between organizations or outside to your peers in the federal space. So a lot of activity at the order level. This is where you really get into the depth of our data standard. A couple hundred data elements here, both required and optional. A lot of things wrapped around orders. This is where you're really scoping out what you're going to be doing with that trading partner and what the nature of that engagement is. Is it goods? Is it services? What's the length? What's the cost? What's the delivery mechanism? What's the FOB point? If you don't know FOB point, that's an accounting term that becomes extremely important in G-invoicing as we get into the performance world. But that basically says who's responsible for passing in the performance on this transaction when we get to that step, right? So FOB is a freight on board or free on board, depending upon which accounting book you look in, and definitely an accounting term to basically kind of convey when ownership of goods and or when goods exchange as far as ownership. For services, it's going to be more about when it's rendered. But that drives a lot in G-invoicing. That's a brokered piece at the order level. The other key piece that's brokered at the order level is the TAS, right? That's the other reason most people charge back today or have issues with their IPACs is because it's hitting the wrong TAS. So we're going to capture TAS at order. You're going to broker that with your trading partner. You're going to agree on that TAS right up on the top. And we're going to use that information later on to do your IPAC for you in the IPAC system. So the concept of wrong TAS getting hit, it still exists if you put the wrong TAS on your order, but you have the opportunity here to actually go through that process and make sure that you understand what TAS you're hitting and your trading partner understands it as well. So that's important to note. That's a big piece that we pulled sort of up out of the IPAC world, put it upstream. Performance is the key thing, and all of these things are sort of back and forth between trading partners. They can be obviously done through our user interface. We do envision full data exchange capabilities for an organization the size of DHS. We would envision that your respective ERP providers, and I know we got a full landscape here within DHS, it's not just one. Some places I go to, it's just one. They're doing a lot of work. They've got a lot of work to do yet as well, related to what they're going to do to your offerings and how they're going to support the interface capabilities to exchange this data. But for your volume, I think in 18 you had about $21 billion worth of buy-sell activity. You guys are not going to pivot around and do $21 billion of on-screen entry activity into our system, I would guess. You're more than welcome to, but we would envision that you're going to be leveraging data exchange capabilities to do that, especially considering some of your top trading partners are going to be in that same camp, GSA, DoD, and yourself, actually. You're actually your second most important trading partner, believe it or not. You do most of your business between yourselves, so more on that in a little bit. All right, so performance, again, back and forth. This is where you're sort of, the buyer saying, I got it, the seller saying I did it, and that's an important piece there that really, may or may not be happening today. We certainly don't have a data standard for it. There's invoicing that goes on. There's also a lot of paper chasing and document requests for supporting documentation for IPACs that have already happened today. So this is a key transaction step here to sort of convey what you did before you take the money for it, or convey what you got before you make the payment for it. So important. And so important, in fact, that initially we were talking on the program about making this sort of a required step because it was a big lift, a big change, and we really got to the point where this is an absolute. We got to have this. We got to have the exchange of performance data. So important, in fact, that we're going to use it to actually generate IPACs for you. So we're actually going to take you out of the IPAC system now. This is really going to be your last step in the IGT buy-sell process, to exchange performance information with your trading partner. And from that, G-Invoicing will have an agreement, an order, and a performance transaction, and enough data to put together an IPAC transaction and send it over for you. We'll trigger that off the FOB point, depending upon who says they're going to do what. You see it on this slide, sort of about towards the bottom there, the delivered performed or the received accepted. So we've got options for either side to sort of be the driver for the settlement. So out of the gate, everybody says, oh, I want control. I don't want anybody taking my money anymore, right? But remember what you asked for there. You got to be responsible then for passing in the performance. So there's a lot of organizations out there that just take your money today. Maybe that works well. Maybe that's working okay for you. They do realize that in order to take your money, they're going to have to pass a performance transaction in that has some information on it. So at a minimum, you're going to have a little bit more information up front than maybe you do today. You're not making those calls and requests for data. On the flip side of that, you can take back control of your world, right? You can say, no, I'm going to be FOB destination in this case. I'm the buyer. I'm going to tell you when I got this. I'm going to tell you when I'm satisfied with the services, and then you'll get your money in IPAC, and that's fine. That's a brokered arrangement between you and your trading partner. I do, and I'm not going to lie, I envision that this is where what we call the IPAC wars today, where it's chargebacks, this is where the IPAC wars pick up and go to. It goes to this point of negotiating who's going to run the show when it gets to the performance piece. At the end of the day, the seller is always going to have to pass performance. There's no way around that. So if you're primarily a selling organization, you're going to be in a position of always having to put a performance transaction into the system. So GSA out there, been doing a lot of work with GSA. They know this. They know that they're going to have to trigger a performance transaction that conveys information to their trading partners, indicating what money they're about to pull if they're going to be an FOB source. In other cases, if their partners are asking to be in that FOB destination camp where the buyer wants to examine those goods, they understand that they've got to pass enough information and do their job right in order to be able to make sure they get paid, right? Now, it's not completely one-sided. We do have what I call the balance of power here. There's a constructive receipt day feature in G-Invoicing that basically allows you and the trading partner to negotiate. So let's take a car, for example. You order a car from GSA, 3 weeks maybe a month, you're going to say. From the time you tell me that you ship this car to me, it's going to go on a truck, it's going to come across the country, it's going to land somewhere, we're going to make sure it's right, and then I'll pay you. So you broker that arrangement with GSA. Say, hey, we're going to need 10, 15, 20 business days. We'll go out to 90, that's our max in the system, so a full quarter, but you broker that. So you have that period of time to check things out. If you do nothing, we're going to automatically settle that transaction out and GSA is going to get paid. Or you can pay them earlier, you can wait till the last day, whatever that may be. But again, that's a brokered arrangement between you and a trading partner. And you do that with everybody, right? This is where you can sort of position your world. If you got really good business partners you have no trouble with, go ahead and set them up and let them pull the money and just go about as you have been. If they're troublesome, then maybe you want to flip some switches here and put yourself in a little bit more control. And vice versa, right? You could be on the selling side too. So I've been kind of conveying this as you as the buyer, but it works both ways. So that's where we are in performance. It is going to be required. As I said, it does drive a lot. There's just a lot of information out on our program guide about things that should be happening at the performance transaction level. That's where we see a lot of the accounting activity happening as well. So it really does sort of leverage the back and forth brokering data information exchange process that we're trying to put in place here. As I said, this does take over for IPAC, so anything that you're doing today as far as going into IPAC, passing a file into IPAC, this is where it becomes now. It becomes a performance transaction. So easier said than done. I'll openly admit that, right? But the concept of sort of picking up what you do today as far as passing information into IPAC, and now you're passing performance information in, and that's where sort of the vendors are going in some of their work in the program as well. All right, so that's top to bottom flow a lot, maybe more than we need to do today. I want to talk about the comply side of this, the mandate side. Valencia hit on it a little bit. So there was a TFM last year. They did the mandate, also asked for for implementation plans. You guys have done great on that, sounds like. A lot of good work there. There will be an amendment. We do about a 6-month cycle on the TFM, so there'll be an amendment to that TFM coming out in May, so this month, that restates that deliverable date. We did move it a month because of the shutdown. A lot of folks lost time, so we did slide back a month from May to June on that. But you guys are still certainly doing great as far as where you're at. The 2021 date's out there as far as the conversion, so that's full life cycle top to bottom. That's where everybody's got to be. That's what we want to see in the implementation plans as to where you line out according to that. And more importantly, we want to be able to get that information so we can share it with you, right? So I said, I think out of your 21 billion, I think like 4.5 billion of that is amongst yourselves. So you obviously control both sides of the arrangement there. That's a good place for you all to start as far as your work. We highly encourage, circling the wagons and looking at your own internal business, because you're going to control both the buyer and the seller side there. For places that you're not, your own trading partner, the DODs, the GSAs of the world, so there's that big sort of gray question mark out there, right? When are they going to be compliant? Because this is a dance. This is not like typical Treasury initiatives where, think of like a GTAS or a Data Act where we said, just dump your data on us, right? All your stuff, all you. Now it's you and your partner come into a portal, a common place that we're sharing information. So it involves them being there too, and we recognize that. So we want to try and put as much information out to kind of let you know where they are so that you can adjust your own schedule. And there's a few things you can do initially. You can start putting some agreements in, you can get your side in there. Agreements don't require system work, so we hope to see most organizations at least be able to get to the agreement step and get those brokered. We understand the order side is going to come into the system world, and that's a bigger push or a bigger effort there, dollars and time and resources. So, but that information that comes in on those plans is important for us to try and spin that around and share it back. And it's also going to give us an opportunity at Treasury to take a look and really take the temperature of where we're at. So we've been doing this type of thing, a lot of in the weeds, sleeves up sessions with organizations for quite a few years now. We hear a lot of the challenges, we hear some consistent ones, we hear some new ones depending upon the mission of the organization. But we really want to take that overarching gauge of where everyone is and what they're seeing and what they're thinking in terms of going to be the lift points. And that lets us kind of refocus our efforts program-wise as to where we want to address things. Is it policy? Is it systems? Is it the data spec? Is it the vendors? What is it? So we want to understand that. So that's why it's important to make sure that there's good information in those plans so we understand, what they are and can address that. So that's the value of the plans. In terms of work groups, I'm going to check time here, make sure we're good on time. Yeah, we're doing good. So I saw some hands go up for ITWG. There's also another work group that's run through fiscal service. It's not through I work in what's known as fiscal accounting and fiscal service. There's also an organization within fiscal service called the Financial Innovation and Transformation Area, FIT or OFIT, you may have heard them called. So they actually run a financial management standards committee. I know Stacey Marcotte, I think, was here this morning speaking, or maybe it was yesterday, I can't remember the agenda. She's a member of the overarching governance board there, I know, is an active speaker in some of those discussions. But that group is really, it's got a lot of themes to it, but one of them is G-invoicing specific and really wrapped around what the vendors are doing. So I think Jeff Bobich actually does a financial management subgroup, but there's subgroups aligned to each of the key ERP vendors, so that being SAP, Oracle, and CGI Momentum. The Oracle group is co-chaired by Fiscal Service and the Enterprise Services Center out of DOT. The CGI group is chaired by Reed Waller at Justice. And then the SAP group is chaired by Martin Quinlan of the Department of Interior. So you've got like folks that are out there in the world living and breathing IGT buy sell that are chairing these subgroups that are aligned to the vendors, and those are places where you can come together. And I'm telling you all this because I think it's important for DHS because you guys are so spread across multiple systems. So in some places I just talk about your Oracle group, or I just talk about, but here I need to talk about them all because I think there's probably pockets here where you go into each of those. And I encourage you to work through Valencia or just work through the website, go through FIT's website, and there's some contact information here. Make sure you're plugged into those groups. What they're designed to do is be the common voice for users of those respective offerings so that the SAPs of the world hear a common need coming forward to them versus just the single inbound emails. Hey, I need this. I'd like to see this. That's helping them tremendously to understand what they need to be crafting into their offerings to support both G-invoicing and a variety of other things. It's not just G-invoicing they're hearing about. So it's a great platform for you to get in there and sort of have a voice with them. So definitely encourage you to and make sure you understand how you're plugging in. I know some organizations, probably not a bad idea, check with Valencia and make sure she understands how overall the organization wants to run into those. Sometimes you get those rogue folks that want to go in there and act like they're speaking on behalf of an entire department when they're not. So be careful about how you do that. But just wanted you to know that it's out there. Our ITWG will continue to live on. We'll continue to have a very strong, obviously, intergovernmental theme, really driving through a lot of the G-invoicing stuff probably for a little bit longer. I can tell you that we had a brief this morning about maybe the deck that's coming up here in a couple weeks for May. It should be a little bit lighter. I think the last one was extremely heavy. We just got a lot of stuff we got to pour out to you. And we really just need you to take it and just try to digest some of it and give us some feedback on it. The only way we can sort of use that as a sounding board, we've got 1,300 people on that group that we send that information out to. We average about 400 to 500 that dial into that call. So that's a lot of people that we're hitting at one time, which is great for us, but we just, like I said, we've really just got to back it up and just kind of pour it out and then let everybody kind of chew on it and come back with questions. Those surveys that we send out are just critical. We value the stuff that comes in on that survey a lot. So where we're heading for the remainder of this year, so a lot of this kind of stuff, engagement, we're getting into, I call this our summer, you guys are the opening act for my summer concert series, by the way, so thank you. The t-shirts are outside. So we do our summer concert tour. We hit, the bigger events, the AGAs, the PD. I don't know if we're going to be at PDI, DOD's PDI this year. I don't know if they're going to have us there, but definitely we'll have some presence at AGA, JFMIP. We have our financial conference in the fall or in late summer in August there. So a lot of engagement, a lot of one-on-one. So we're working obviously through Valencia and the group that she's stood up and is doing a great job on managing there. So definitely, come through her if you need to have sort of a sleeves up session with us. We can accommodate those sorts of things. I know we've already done a few of those. Lots of training, reference materials out there on the website. We continue to try and polish those and make them better. Webinars. We've got training here in Crystal City. I know a few folks, you guys came over for a day and spent some time with us going through that. So definitely an opportunity there to get hands-on in the screen and understand it. Even though you may be ultimately being system-based and exchanging data, it's good to understand, definitely the first part you have to do in the system, but good to understand just how the nuts and bolts of the system work and get a vision of there. I mentioned the ITWG, mentioned the specs, vendor work. We're really leaning on these vendors hard. I can't tell you that enough if everybody's got a question as to what they're doing. All I can tell you is we're beating the crap out of them, basically. And if there's any in the room, they can probably raise their hand and attest to that. We're leaning on them hard to get their information in front of you so that you can understand what you're facing in terms of their upgrades and their offerings. They're all working hard at it. It's not easy, right? This is a big change, and we get that. So we're trying to push them as hard as we can. At the end of the day, they're private entities that have a business model that they have to follow, and they're doing their best to accommodate us into their upgrade streams. So we're trying to get out in front of them as much as we can and get that information to them. As far as steps for you, a little takeaway, just sort of a high-level playbook. We're kind of working on some documentation that gets a little deeper into this. I'm not sure if a playbook always is something that's easy to slide across the table with everybody, because everybody's playbook's going to be a little bit different. Everybody's got a little bit of a different team. I always use the NFL example, right? You can't take Belichick's playbook and then go slide it across the table to the Redskins and expect them to execute it the same way, right? It's just not going to work. Players are different, missions are different, the way your teams are structured are different. But the general sense of what you're after here, and you're already doing this. So Valencia's got that team working. I think you guys are starting to gap some of your elements from what I've seen, and do that inventory of your data, understand where your system's at, really just kind of